Welcome, welcome, Dominique. Heck, I'm so thrilled to do this with you. I thrilled to have been had a role in publishing this book, Autopus, which I have a well-worn copy to show. Yeah.
Yes.
Got a bit water damaged actually because I was in a rainstorm carrying a book, so
I see.
it's taken on.
Well, it's full of birds and full of water too, so it's
That's
quite
right. So,
appropriate.
um, and so at Beltway Editions, we published this some months ago. Uh, Excited to have your work in our collection. And this is the Poetry Channel, and these are the interviews with poets. I call them Talking with Poets. So welcome to the Poetry Channel, Dominique. And can you just give us a few words about how you came to the idea of writing Autopus, perhaps define the title for us, and our listeners could be anywhere in the world. They could be familiar with your work, they may not be. So uh, go ahead. A few words about
Um,
Autopus and the origins. Yeah,
yes, the title actually it's like auto as AUTO. So it's a kind of an autobiography of my relationship with the place where I live, and it's focused on the Merry Creek, which I walk every day.
right,
Um, Yes, so that's really what it's about, and it's a triptych. I like the number three for some reason, and each section has a different mood and a different tone.
right.
Um, yes, and I wanted in to actually involve the environment as a kind of a character. So the
Yes,
trees speak, for instance, because they witness the business of humans. Yeah.
that's a very, very, very important point you just made about the trees are living witnesses to their and survivors also,
Indeed. Yes.
those that are still there. Um, and we think that we shape the environment and we control it and so on, but we are befuddled when the environment strikes back, so to speak. Um,
Yes.
uh, so tell us about, I love the triptych. I think of these medieval paintings, in three, part divided in three. Three, of course, for me, I grew up in a Catholic tradition, and I think of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and then I think of the three-act play as one that has a sort of positive turn at the end rather than the two-act play, which seems to me that the two acts are of the existential absurd, the no exit, you know.
Yes.
But you give us an exit, I think, in these. But you have some very hard matters that you talk about. I mean, you are also,
Yeah, I also think of
yeah,
Freud's The Three Caskets.
the
So
three
it's a
caskets.
reference, yes,
Ah,
a
okay,
reference to death. And
okay,
there is quite a bit of death in this book. I mean,
right,
it's a
right,
joyous book, but
right.
but there is anxiety and there is actually death, especially in the second part. Yeah.
I keep coming. There's some incredibly luscious lyric uh, poems, passages, and then of course there's this very dark middle section with the murders that take place in Merritt Creek. Would you like to read us a few poems, a couple of poems, just to give us a flavor of the first part of the book? Perhaps the first piece, whatever you would like, but and then
Yes.
from the
Um,
second and the third. Yeah, go ahead.
so I'll start with the opening. So number one.
Right.
Lulled by the night's lingering breath, the city hibernates. Funneling wind at your back, you skirt the creek. Follow the trickle of bruises the light leaves in its wake. You take the path down to the bridge, the no sun enfolded in fog, eucalypts rustle, reeds rumour, Australian wood ducks, chestnut teals, and a lone hardhead on corrugated water. Magpie larks chatter in a she-oak. A nankeen night heron darts in your path as if to say you don't exist. Under the bridge, a black swan on a nest intermeshed with plastic. Now the wind embraces you. Mud sucks at your boots. Rainbow lorikeets, fairy corellas, and musk lorikeets clatter about. You climb the escarpment. Here, creeping bent grass, English broom, arum lily, prickly pear, periwinkle overflow garden fences, gusts of wind through veils of bridal creeper and poison ivy. So I
Glorious.
think it kind of sets the tone because there is a
Yeah.
lushness of the environment, but then also there is the reference to colonization and to the damage done by humans.
Right,
Um,
right. And the poison ivy but then you mentioned in the middle of the poem, I think a very important line, Nankeen night heron darts in your path as if to say you don't exist.
you
Now,
don't, yes,
the non-existence, I'm thinking a lot about this these days. How does the human being exist, or how does the poet exist? Because you write, go ahead and just meditate on that. Because is your book an act of faith that your steps have passed through this creek, that you have walked this in this wood, um, or is it something else, uh, an invitation to? Well, I'll let you meditate on that. I'm curious to know if if the,
I think selfhood in this book does not exist. It is multiple, and the first part actually refers to an incident when a human that is actually my son who was having a crisis. It was during COVID, and I feared for his life actually. So yes, and when you actually walk the creek at dawn or at dusk, it is teeming with life, and you as a human feel excluded. It is quite it is surprising. So the the poet is a ghost. I'm ghosting myself in the landscape.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So is the book then a kind of a proof, a proof of existence, a proof? I mean that this even a ghost, even as a ghost, you did manage to hear that those bird sounds and note them down. Um, and is that the larger ecological crisis that is being touched on in these some of these or in these poems? That
Yes.
yeah, I mean
And it's about I think there is ambivalence. I'm trying to prove that I exist through language, but also asserting my importance as a writer
right,
because
right.
because because the environment has its own language, its own memory,
Very,
and
very good, very good. Your impotence as a writer, right? Very important.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah. I've been feeling this impotence in the larger political sense. We're recording this conversation at a time when, elections of a new leadership. And I'm in the United States, you're in Australia, but I'm just talking. But it's very. They say, calm yourself, meditate, go for a walk. I too walk in the woods close to my home every day. But now reading your book is like a walk in the woods for me. It has that function of helping me hear and listen and see. more clearly, and so it's a very, 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 very a rich experience to sort of put on this virtual reality headset of your book and live,
Yes.
you know, there, uh,
Mm.
and live away from what's going on, the noise, the say it in Spanish, el batiburrillo, the, the chaos that's
Yes.
around. So I recommend this book also for that, for those readers looking for a meditation that at the same time is a very serious reflection on the ecological crisis that we are all living on, wherever we are on the planet. Would you read another poem from the book, as you wish, from the first section, or if you'd like to discuss the second?
Let me think.
For example, I could suggest page 24. I love the way
Yes.
you finish that, but number two,
Ah,
yeah,
yes. So it's a poem actually dedicated to my son.
yeah,
I'm sort of having a conversation with this person who's not there. 10. Zero time, moonless dark. I should have hurtled after you in spite of the curfew, but instead recomposed my alphabet. Were you to return from this too long unimpulse, I'd tell you to sit with me. I'd tell you to listen. Look, we are not hermits.
it's heartbreaking. Yeah, very, very powerful lines. And and enriched also by the context you give them. Uh,
Yes, and it's the so it's me just waiting for this
right.
person to return, and I just write a poem using my alphabet. So each line starts with a different letter, and it doesn't make sense. You consider the first line, atomist of love, atomize agape into ablated symbols of absence.
Mm,
And then it goes on, babies are born breathing with the unbearable burden of being. And it continues with C and so forth. So, yes, there is ambivalence, there is ambiguity. I think it's actually at the heart of all of my work.
yeah,
Um,
and it's a tour de force, a linguistic tour de force, at the very least. I mean, I think of Dylan Thomas's poem where I think it was 369. I forget how many lines, but there's a rhyme from the first to the 269th, and then the second line to the 268th, and so on. I mean, it's that kind of bizarre, I mean, absolutely mathematically provable, um,
yes,
and I,
and it's surreal as well.
yeah,
So, yes,
yeah.
bizarre
I,
completely. Yes, yes.
and I'm grateful that you talk about the background of this, and I hope I don't know. I feel like wanting to ask a reporter's question about your son, but I'll let you speak more if you want. Otherwise, we'll go on. In terms of whether the inevitable question, did you?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's my youngest son, and I always thought he was. I have four sons. He was the most resilient of them all, but he suffered during COVID.
Yes.
He became incredibly depressed, and life had no meaning for him. And yes, he was actually very sick. And so it's me trying to help him resurface from this incredible deep depression. And yet again, it's another kind of impotence. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank
that's
you.
the context of this weird poem in the opening section.
Number 10 and then number 11. Yeah. Uh, it's. I mean, as I've mentioned before we started, that I was just attending a memorial service for Ivana Gelis, who's a poet, a surreal poet, really a very brilliant. And this number 11 reminds me of the sort of the grandest dances of language. And so I don't know if you would be up to reading it out for our listeners, now that we're speaking of it, or is it too much?
The whole of
The
number
whole,
11.
yeah.
I'll give it a try. I might,
Okay.
I might trip, but yes. So I'll start.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anatomists of love atomize agape into ablated symbols of absence. Babies are born breathing with the unbearable burden of being. Chromosomes come in pairs, excruciating the stars. Distancing describes the disjunction death demands of us. Epitaphios is the most heart-rending elegy a mother ever conceived. Fontanelles are an infant's soft spots prefiguring mellifluous kisses. Grey griffins grip time's edges as generic memory turns to gold. Hearing hastens amygdala and hippocampus hip-hop. I cling to the idea that ideation need not kill I with id. Joy animates itself like a jaguar in the jungle. Kulik invokes flashbulb memory to speak of quirky panic attacks. Language is a labyrinth layered with flesh and soul. Metaphoric museums exhibit the mind's minute mirrors. Neurasthenics negate the oniric neverlands they navigate. Once you broke your odyssey, and I promised you an origami au question organ. Perhaps the painterly poetry pluming my veins poisoned you. Quaint quirtipop, let us pick a quarrel in the Queen's Tree. Recollection means ripping reverie remnants from intranquility. Screen memories scrape the surface of the symbolic. Timpani are the typhoons of titillated hearts. Unconscious associations usher us towards unsounded universes. Voices evade vision the way vixens veer off vining grooves in Vatic evolution. Wrangling with words wakes the whirlpool of wax wings. Ceres, quixotic on my breath, I hear a xylophone tick-a-tick, ticking. Your life is no yoke, yodeling, yeti, lexis, yo-yo, but a yearning. Zigzag, zip-zap, ziz, asterix, buzz, zygotes, fuvas, infebrile, zephyr. So it ends with a migraine.
It's just incredible, incredible. Well done, well done. I usually wear a hat. I'm not wearing it in this moment, but I take it off symbolically.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Um, which reminds me that I mean, a poet is the poet's material is language and the music of language, right? And the music of thinking translated into words. So into and capturing that music. And here you just you make some kind of orchestra, you make symphony is both dystopic and utopic at the same time. I just love it. Tell me about now. We talked about the three parts of Otopos. So,
Yes,
um, which has to do with Berwick Creek, this part of Melbourne where you live, where you walk. But Merrick Creek, I mean, for other writers, it becomes, for example, Narayan in India, he wrote about Malgudi, which is a fictional town, but it sort of represented South India to the world. And so I think this landscape that you're writing about is a kind of code language for that all readers, wherever we are, can understand and relate to both this human nature conflict and interaction. So tell me how that happens. What happens in the part two of the book, which
Part two, well, the Merry Creek. It's written, it's spelled with an I at the end, but
yeah.
you hear Mary is in, being happy, but it has its sinister side too. And the second part is called the Merry Creek Murders. Something happened in December, on the 23rd of December 2001, I think, or 2000 actually. Um, a woman was just jogging along the Merry Creek, as one does,
Mm,
and she was viciously assaulted. She was raped and nearly drowned, and she survived her ordeal. And it had an enormous impact on the community. And I thought, I mean, I was very disturbed by it. And I started writing the poem. And then I started researching the history of the Merry Creek. And there were other murders, there were infanticides, there were all sorts of things. And so it centers on this woman's sentence. And it happened on a beautiful day, sparkling with sunshine. There were people everywhere, and people were going about their business, I guess. But nobody noticed anything, and I think that's what really, really disturbed me. We were just there. I was there. I just dropped off my son at the cricket ground, and nobody saw or heard anything. She'd been screaming, I'm sure. So it is structured as a kind of different witnesses speak. So you have the trees, are quite active in there because they saw everything, but
right, right.
humans didn't want to, or didn't pay attention. Yes,
I
so
think of
that's
yeah, I think of Icarus falling in the background of the painting of Bruegel's, no, while the people in the front are continuing with their lunch on the
indeed.
grass, yeah, and other people, someone else is walking a dog, citing Auden's poem about yeah. Will you read us some of the Merry Creek murders and then help us understand how these poems can help us both understand this dark impulse in the human psyche, or uh,
Yes.
find a way to sort of cope with it and still be merry in life, you know, to play on that double meaning of merry. Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking of, I don't want to say that poems are self-help,
No, not at
but but
all,
I
not
but
at
I
all.
but I do find their help.
Yes, yes.
So that's the sort of
So perhaps I shall start with the first poem, from In the Voice of the Trees.
yes,
Is that okay?
yes, that's great.
You call us river gums. We don't mind. We are all family, though your botanists call us different names. Swarm gum, red box, red stringy bark, mana gum, grey box, yellow box. Even the sheogs don't mind your botanists' names. Those names are pretty literal. We hope they remind you we just are. We sway and creak in the wind. This doesn't mean we don't feel, hear, see. We do. We see further than you. Today, the story begins with a human jogging along the Merry Creek. We don't give you names, assign you a species, genus, or gender. They are oblivious to the whipping of their ponytail on their cheekbones. They are oblivious to the amber baubles of bitter kangaroo apples. They stomp past, step after step, as they loop their way back under the bridge. They are thinking about Gar falcons, how they fly out and always return, even when the leash breaks. We snicker at the fantasy, but we shouldn't. The eutaxia and honeypots shiver, huddle and droop from sight. We sway and creak, no better than to say aloud that their boat ponytail drags them back to the nearby bushes. We smell leather, the pale hood falling over her eyes. Yes, we know they are young women. It's an old story. We smell fear and leather and blood. We see her assailant. He takes her through her skin thin bark. I think I'll stop there.
Okay, okay.
Gives you an idea.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of, Rambo and Season in Hell, the sort of what you do with this poetry. This is truth, witnessing. This is witnessing. It's written in such dense, magnificent sounds. I mean, if you say them out loud, they stomp past step, as you just did, step after step as they loop their way back under the bridge. This is poetry to be recited, to be sung, to be heard, and we snicker at the fantasy, but we shouldn't. The eutaxia and honeypots shiver. It's just alarming on some level, emotionally alarming, right? When you think about
Is it? I think it's the beauty of English. That's
it,
it's the rhythm,
right?
Yes,
I'm glad you said that because, of course, you are a native writer in French.
in French, yes.
Other languages too, French principally, no? Yeah, but from
Yes,
Belgium,
yes,
from Belgium. I should have mentioned that at the beginning, and you've been so kind to read my poems in French and correct them, and thank you for that. But
it's okay.
uh,
Yeah, I enjoy doing that actually.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
but aside from, ho- perhaps that'll give me a question about how, as a migrant in Australia, migrant in Melbourne, is that, but living on the land that belongs to the native, or does it belong to them? Because there's this tradition of saying I'm speaking on so and so's people's land, but are you
yes,
really?
yes,
I mean, that's another question I ask. Who are we to assume, even the most indigenous people, that this is indeed our land? Well, I'll let you speak about, reflect, perhaps moving in the book and moving away from the book, about your role as a poet, as a migrant poet in Australia, a migrant, not only geographically migrant, but linguistically migrant, migrating into English and making of English this incredible feast of salmons. And we think of other poets like Beckett who migrated from one language to another, or Conrad. So anyway, I'll let you
yeah,
go.
yeah. It is. So the third part, which is called fervor,
Yeah,
is a kind of a love story, I suppose, but it is also a tribute to the indigenous people who live here. There are still people, on the other side of my fence. There are indigenous people, and it's ironic because tomorrow is Australia Day, and for the indigenous people, it is Invasion Day. So yes, I am conflicted. I'm not even an Australian, so I don't know where I belong finally. It's just that I happen to speak English and translate myself into French, and sometimes write in French too, and sometimes use other languages, yeah, to um, to fit my vision, my poetic vision. So I studied Germanic languages, so that is, what I studied at university. It was English, Dutch, and German. English was my preferred language, and I specialized in what they called new literatures in English. So African literature, Australian literature, Canadian literature, and so forth. Um, but I had this love for Australia, which probably reaches back to my childhood when I saw an article on the indigenous people of Australia. So this fascination has a very long history. Um, and yes, so I spoke, when we first arrived, we spoke English outside of the house and French inside. But something happened in 1994. My brother died, and then my second child died.
Mm,
And that second event um, meant I could no longer speak French.
mm,
It's been a very long journey going back to French, and that happened 10 years ago when I was invited to the poetry festival at Trois-Rivières.
yes.
Um, I had to translate, or I had to present 50 poems in French, so I felt compelled, or well, obliged to yes, to do that myself. I was not going to ask somebody else to translate my poems, and so it's been, yeah, retraining my mind, my heart at the same time. So yes, that's the business of languages. So fortunately, I had English when these events happened. Yeah.
These are lacerating, deeply difficult events that in my case, I lost my native language, Tamil, as a child. At 8 year old, I stopped speaking Tamil, and I think I was too afraid to speak it again because of a kind of very deeply troubling event that or series of events that took place around that time. So I am sympathetic to what you just said, of course, and this idea of retraining yourself is fascinating to me. Of course, and how many poems did they ask you? Troy 50 poems, did I hear?
50 poems,
Yeah, that's
yes.
a
Well,
lot.
they were
Yeah,
short
right,
poems.
right, right.
I was writing shorter poems then.
Yeah, it's an
Um,
amazing festival. I've read there as well a couple of times, and I have a
yes,
different relationship to French. It's an acquired language for me. I worked in Cote d'Ivoire and I learned it there really, and then and in Canada and in Haiti. So I've had three experiences of French in the Outre-mer, and you're having English in the Outre-mer as well, in a sense, by being in Australia as opposed to England. But then the English of Australia or the English of Sri Lanka or the English of India, these are all vigorous, lively English expressions. And thankfully now respected. One respects the other. There isn't the
yes, yes,
same arrogance that one has in the French world about the French of the Hexagon versus the French of the Outremer, no? Anyway, I don't know if you.
yeah. Although that's dissipated too. I think in the
Okay.
1990s, the regional accents were actually celebrated. So you no longer had to speak French with a French accent. Although my mother thinks that I speak French with a French accent, and it doesn't go well.
Okay. Okay. When you say
It's
regional, you
Afrikaans,
mean.
no.
Oh,
Yes,
okay. By regional, do you mean
that's an
regional French
inflection.
in Europe
Yes,
or
yes.
regional as in including.
The accent.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the idioms. I'm talking about
Okay.
the
The
accent.
accent.
You know.
Okay. 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 So
Yes.
when you mention the word regional, you're talking about regional in Europe, not regional as in Africa or elsewhere.
Yeah, regional. Yes,
Got it.
there are
Understood.
different accents in even in France. People speak with in Provence they have a very strong accent as opposed to Parisian French, which is supposed to be the pure
Right,
French.
right, right.
And it's the same in Belgium or in Switzerland. There is an accent, l'accent du terroir. Yeah.
Now,
So
going back to Otopos, now let's go to the third part. You mentioned it's a celebration. Tell us about that, and then we can perhaps talk
um,
further.
yes. Let me think. Um, I think it started with the festival of the sacred kingfisher.
Mm.
The kingfisher is a tiny bird, iridescent blue, very, very pretty. But um,
A very
so yes,
important bird in my home country as well, kingfisher.
is it?
Yes,
Oh,
in Sri
yes.
Lanka. Yeah.
So what does it symbolize in your country?
I think of the beer, the kingfisher beer in India, but I know in Sri Lanka, I'm not. I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting. And that's
Ye-
another problem of migration is the forgetting. The struggle of man against power, as Kundera wrote, is a struggle of memory against forgetting. I'm
Yes,
afraid I've
yes.
forgotten. Go ahead.
So it's yeah, the kingfisher, the little kingfisher is a kind of an omen. So it symbolizes resilience and life. And locally, there is at the um, is it the solstice? Yes, there is a festival called the Sacred Kingfisher Festival, and people gather around the Merry Creek. Um, and there are festivities, there are dances, there are people eat food and so forth to celebrate that. And now, of course, indigenous people or their descendants are involved in the celebration. So that is my encounter with you know with this part and a celebration of also the mm, multilingual Melbourne, multi-ethnic, because yes, so um,
In a sense, you are an ambassador for the native people to the rest of the world, or you are a kind of interpreter. I mean, and in that multilingual, multi-ethnic world that we all live in, including the indigenous of the Merry Creek
I don't consider myself as an ambassador, but maybe as a kind of a mouthpiece,
mouthpiece. Yeah.
in my language. Um, Yes, because I don't know enough about their culture and their languages. I mean, a lot of native languages are extinct. They've been really erased by colonialism. And in some parts of Australia, people are trying to revive their languages, and I think it's a good thing. So yes, it is a tribute to the Merry Creek.
Perhaps
Yeah.
we can um, close on hearing a little bit from further, and then we can come back to talking about where Otopus sits in your among your books, the books that you have given us as readers in the world, and
Okay.
yeah, thanks.
So maybe I shall read number 11. So there is a kind of a love story as backdrop to this kind of festival. And here we are. And here you are. the wind at your back, a red flag fluttering on the horizon line? Or is it the valley quietly afire just before smoke curls and rises and sparks crackle and crack, crawling up the limbs of trees like commas, creep, licking the back of this poem? The question is it worth losing all, even my children? I let it flutter, the word love, now that the wind bends back, bringing the far closer and further afar, now that I pin you down on the page among the tufted bluebells and pin cushions and scarlet runners where red is redder than blood and green greener against red where our bodies fail to hear the music rise where the river sings. Yuk, 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 yuk.
Marvelous. You know, I can't help but think about the yellow fog that rubbed its wind muzzle on the window panes,
In
in
Yates.
the love song of J. Alfred
Oh, of
Prufrock,
course.
which
Yes, yes,
which
yes.
it's somewhere in the background of these in these lines as
Maybe,
I listen to
maybe.
you and read the licking the back of this poem.
And the yuk yuk, it's actually the sound eels make in the local indigenous language, because the river once teemed
With
with
eels.
eels, and yes, there are still eels, but more in the sewerage at the these days.
I
Yes,
see. So there are still eels. It's still the eels are still
yes,
reproducing.
yes, yes, yes.
I've never seen yuk yuk yuk. This is a first for me, and I'm grateful that
Yes, so here I am, so no, I'm not the ambassador. I'm appropriating the Wurundjeri language, so the local language.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're reporting it. I mean, I like to think about more generously about. I'm hesitant to use the word appropriate. Rather, I prefer to say that you are celebrating it somehow by naming it. And so I
Mm,
thank you for that. We are uh, in a world where we need to be kind to each other. And one way of showing that kindness, I think, is by wearing each other's clothes, and swapping each other's jerseys, at the end of the game.
mm, mm.
So but yes, of course, I'm completely sensitive to your being sensitive to the notion of appropriating. I think I mean, I'm not quite sure how I would feel if I was living where you are next to indigenous lands that have been somewhat diminished in size, by history,
Mm,
by myself and my others. I've been a minority all my life, so I guess that's been an advantage, because I have not had to deal with that question of being part of some majority horde that is like a storm of locusts, destroying
yes.
everything.
Mm,
Unfortunately, in the United States, as we record this conversation, I'm just bombarded with this idea that this country belongs to only some of us, uh,
yeah.
or, and uh, and that the rest of us have to be quiet, or we could be pushed out. And so, I think your book is a great book, and I say that because it's full of the some of the strongest, most beautiful, luscious poetry that I've read in a long time. But also, it's a deceptive book because it's a slight book. It's not a huge book. I mean, in terms of pages,
Yes.
poems, but each poem has layers and layers of meaning and references, and I'm grateful. I am, of course, I have a role in it as being involved in Beltway editions and publishing it, but I just as I am with Eliot's four quartets or with some of I mean, poems that I can admire and respect and love and not worry if I don't understand every line or every, you know. And this
Yes,
conversation, though, has helped me enormously open up those doors of perception and understanding, you know, in me. So thank you for that. And I hope we'll have more conversations about your work going forward. Tell me about where this book sits in your career and what are you working on now and what other books you've
um,
released recently or will be releasing.
well, it's an important book. It's number 30, my
Number
30th
30.
book. Yes. And I've just submitted a, a, it's not a collection, it's like a long poem. It's called Voice with a Y in the middle, as in Joyce.
Ah,
Um, yes. And it's based on the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, but it's actually Eurydice, and I call her Evridiki, which is the modern Greek for Eurydice. It's her riposte to Orpheus. So the voice or the voices in that poem are just Eurydice's voices. And I don't know whether it's going to be published or not because it's multilingual. So it's in English, but there is French, there is Spanish, there is a tiny bit of Portuguese, there is Italian, and there are also quotations from Rilke in German. So I play with the idea of the fugue, and there are returning refrains, and sometimes across languages. And I hope it works, and I hope I found an editor who's mad enough to publish this
great,
mad book.
great,
Yes, so that's what yes, I've
wonderful,
just
wonderful.
finished. Yes,
I,
yes.
as you know, I'm in the United States near Washington. But if any for any reason you plan to travel to the United States, please be in touch so we can arrange readings for you and to hear your wonderful recitals both in person. And if there's anything we can do to encourage more of these, I mean, I don't know how you feel about the virtual world, but I'm sure that you are also tired of it and want to get back to in-person poetry.
Yes, in person. I mean, yes, I was recently, I mean, in October, I was at Trois-Rivières, so for the second time, and I was fabulous. I mean, you know what it's like there.
Yeah,
I was there
yeah,
for 10 days, and you start reading or hearing poetry at 8 o'clock in the morning with breakfast, and it goes on until midnight. And so it's poetry until you drop. I was in such a high when I came back. It's funny, it took me a week to actually
right, right.
adjust to
I'm so
being
glad that,
back here.
yeah, yeah, I was there. Yeah. A few years ago, most recently, I don't remember which year it was, but just 2 or 3 years ago. But oh, it's a pity we didn't coincide there. But at some other time we will. When I come to Australia for the first time, which is the lost or the continent yet to be discovered for me, I will come and see you. Um,
Yes, indeed. Yeah, do
um,
come.
yes. Thank you so much, Dominique, for your time and for your poetry. Uh, let's hope we can get this book into uh, to many readers' hands. One thing I will just keep in touch, and I will share this video on the YouTube channel, the Poetry channel, and of course I'll send you a link, and we'll keep writing into this new year. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm going to 1 second.
To end.